I think there's an assumption about slow living that you can achieve it, but it's not. It's something you constantly have to work at. Life creeps in around you all the time, and you have to figure out what you're going to answer to and what you're not going to answer to, or what you're going to put off for another day to carve out that slower space and that slower pace. It's something that we always work toward. And then because of that, it forces us to pay attention and always be reflective about what really is the most important thing right now.
You're listening to the Good Dirt Podcast. This is a place where we dig into the nitty-gritty of sustainable living through food, fashion, and lifestyle.
And we're your hosts, Mary and Emma Kingsley, the mother and daughter founder team of Lady Farmer. We're sowing seeds of slow living through our community platform, events, and online marketplace.
We started this podcast as a means to share the wealth of information and quality conversations that we're having in our world as we dream up and deliver ways for each of us to live into the new paradigm, one that is regenerative, balanced, and whole.
We want to put the microphone in front of the voices that need to be heard the most right now. The farmers, the dreamers, the designers, and the doers.
So come cultivate a better world with us. We're so glad you're here. Now, let's dig in. Hey, Mom.
Hello, good afternoon.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I've been outside. It's a nice, moist, overcast April day, which is really good for the emerging plants. And I've been cleaning up and planting and doing all kinds of fun things.
Totally. Lady Farmer springtime.
Yep.
Would you consider the way that you're spending your days and your time to be part of a rich life?
Absolutely.
Why is that?
Well, I get to be outside a lot. I get to have my hands in the dirt. I get fresh air. I get lots of exercise. I get to plant things and see them grow, see the results of my efforts. It is indeed rich. There's so many ways my life is rich. That's just one of them.
Today we're talking to Shannon Hayes, an author, blogger, farmer, restaurant owner, chef, and mother. She wrote the book Radical Homemakers in 2014 and talks about that experience in the interview today. She also wrote a more recent book called Redefining Rich. When we were preparing for this interview, both of us listened to Redefining Rich on Audible. It's something we have referenced over and over to one another. I've recommended it to many people. And it's really sort of about what you were saying, which is thinking about what rich really means to you. And then also thinking about how if you are in touch with what you want in life and what makes you happy, then a little bit of creativity can get you a long way to living that out. It almost doesn't matter how much monetary income you have or what your job looks like. If you're able to be creative and create this richness for yourself, you can do anything. It's inspiring, affirming, and validating, and it's such a good listen.
Yes, one of the measures that she and her husband used to determine true wealth from the beginning of their marriage was to come up with a quality of life statement. That is to write down the things that they wanted to be a part of their life, which were priority. And as she explains in the book, they have used that as a measure for all the years since then to always go back and check in with what they're doing to see if it measures up to their quality of life statements. One example of something that's on Shannon's quality of life statement that impressed me and I think of so often is that she wants a life where she can take a nap every day. I think that's pretty cool. How revolutionary is that to plan your vocation around
The ability to take a nap.
I've been thinking about what's on my quality of life statement, although I haven't officially written it down. Have you?
I haven't written mine down yet. And I think That's a good exercise for both of us because we do a lot of thinking. I
Yeah,
feel
we
like
do.
writing it down would be a really big deal. Now that's just but let's talk about what we've been thinking about. Do you wanna go first? What kinds of things will you include in your quality of life statement when you do sit down to write it down?
Yeah. And it's funny because I woke up in the middle of the night thinking about this. I knew we were going to talk about it today.
Mhm.
The term came to me, time autonomy, which is the ability to decide what I'm going to do with my own time. I recognize now in my 60s that I really have never done well on a outwardly imposed schedule. I I need the freedom to be able to determine for myself what I'm going to do when. That might sound like a hugely privileged thing, and it is. But as Shannon talks about, we have to really get to this, not be afraid of those things, not be backing off because the system says, "Oh, that's not normal. You can't have that." We have to be able to confront it and say, "This is on my quality of life statement, and I'm gonna do what I can to keep it there." So time autonomy was a big one for me. And I think things that probably go under that category are the daily walk. That's really important to me. Time outdoors and time in the garden and also good food. It's very important to quality of life for me. But yeah, unstructured time was a big one for me. There are a lot of things that go in that category. And of course, this is all aside from the things I think we all want, like quality time with family, the people we love, time with the children, meaningful interactions, all of those things. Um, these are more particular things, more nuanced things that make us who we are. And it's really important to recognize these things that really lift us up and make us happy. So, what about you?
I need time to be with other people. I have people that I love that are spread out geographically, and I want to be able to visit people. So I think that looks like having flexibility in my work and my life. It also means having a safe and operational vehicle. And it means having a flexibility in schedule, but not just because it's nice to be flexible. Specifically, what motivates me is being able to see people that I love and to go out and experience things. That's really fun. I also love home and being home, but I wouldn't call myself a homebody. I'm definitely someone who likes the flexibility to be able to take time. In Shannon's book, she talks a lot about being able to take, even though they own their own business and they run a restaurant, and for a lot of things that you would think on paper, they would seem very tied down. They have a similar quality of life in theirs, which is that they take time off. They take a walk in the woods every day too. And because they have their own business, they designed it that way. So that was really exciting to me. Another one is with my work. I'm finding that I need to have an ability to be creative within my work.
Mm.
Anytime I've had a job where I'm told exactly what to do and what needs to be done, while that can be nice in some degrees, I have zero motivation around it. But if there's room for me to be creative, then I'm just going to do much better. So whether it's my own work or whether I'm working for someone else, creativity has to be a really big part of it. And another one is my physical environment where I'm working and where I'm spending most of my time. This is sounds so crazy, but needs to be something with nice natural light and windows and, you know, access to good food. My physical environment is super important. So when it comes to jobs and working, even if I had the world's best job, if it was in like a windowless basement, then wouldn't be able to do
Oh, I agree with that one big time. I found out early in life with some early jobs that the windowless, artificially air temperature controlled environment was not sustainable for my mental health.
it.
Yeah. I usually ran from those situations as quickly as possible. But I thought of something else while you were talking. I've been thinking about this. I really value time just to sit sometimes without an agenda, like just to have my cup of coffee or sit down at the end of the day and just sit on the porch and listen to the birds. It sounds luxurious and it sounds like something you wouldn't plan around or plan into your quality of life.
Mhm.
But I guess that also relates to time autonomy, but I've never been like super busy and walk around and doing all these things. And there comes that moment when I just can sit down and kind of take in my surroundings. It just feels so good. It's just so
Yeah.
nourishing. I
You
think
need
that
sit time.
I need sit time. I just need to sit. Um, and I love it when other people are sitting with me. You know how much I love coffee on the porch.
Oh, yeah.
You know how much I love people to join me for coffee on the porch.
Or wine.
Yeah, yeah.
Another thing that comes up in Shannon's book, Redefining Rich, is this idea of non-monetary income,
Oh, yeah.
which is something else that we reference a lot in conversations with one another. And also, I think that really is another way of thinking about quality of life statement now that I'm sort of putting them together. So in a quality of life statement, you would probably include things that would be non-monetary income. For example, thinking of your porch sitting time
Yeah.
as something you get from creating a schedule for yourself that allows you to have that time as a type of income instead of I'm going to work this way so that I get this much money so then I can relax. It's like I'm going to work this one way that allows me to have sit time. That's a type of
And
income.
that's its own reward that you need to embrace
Right.
as a reward, as an element of true wealth. The true wealth of your life depends on a combination of these factors that enrich you and nourish you and make you feel peaceful and happy and comfortable. It doesn't all have to be X number of dollars per month, which is what we've been trained to
Yeah, it's a
think.
really different way of thinking about things. A
Yeah.
really clear-cut way, I think, would be, like, the choice that a lot of working mothers go through is to work or not to work because this day and age, a
Mhm.
mother's job, part-time job, full-time job, wouldn't even necessarily pay for the childcare that it would require to care for the children while she's at the job. So, a big choice that a lot of women make is what is the trade-off of that? For some, it might look like you get the job that pays for the childcare, but the non-monetary income side of that, if it's important to you, is that you have a career outside the home, that you have these things that you're doing outside your family, which might be really life-giving for you. The flip side of that is if you do choose to not work and for a paycheck, but to stay home and do that sort of work, then you might not be getting a paycheck, but your income would be more time with your family, more autonomy, more control over the home, and not having to hire help and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
So that's a pretty cut and dry way of thinking about it.
yeah, and directly to that example, the arrangement that you and I have where I can do childcare for you, I can watch the baby while you are doing lady farmer things.
Yeah.
So there are two ways that serves as income for us. One is non-monetary income for you in that you're not having to pay someone else for childcare while you do lady farmer tasks.
Mhm.
And the non-monetary income for me is that I get one-on-one time with my grandchild, which is priceless. You can't put a price on that.
Totally.
So it's such a win-win if you allow yourself to reframe all of these ideas around your work, your income, your quality of life. What does all that mean? And this book is just really a terrific study of all that. She gives wonderful examples. She's a wonderful storyteller. And yeah, it was just a really great conversation.
I love this one quote from her blog from January 2020 about non-monetary income. Non-monetary income never gets a dollar figure attached to it, but it offsets considerable expense. It includes the food we grow and cook for ourselves, the child or elder care, the tuition that homeschooling might supplant. It includes what we might do for barter or personal expenses that may be offset by a business. But the non-monetary income is greater than that. There are parts that aren't quantifiable, as I've talked about many times, the true wealth.
Yes.
So maybe, well, first of all, we totally recommend that you listen to this book or read this book, Redefining Rich.
Yep.
Also, her first book, Radical Homemakers, great. Very interesting to read now, 10 years later in this time where a lot more people are in on this idea
Yes.
of radical homemaking, as she expresses in this interview as well.
Yeah, she gives a really interesting retrospective on that experience of writing that book in that time. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so just a little bit more about Shannon. She operates Sap Bush Hollow Farm with 3 generations of her family in upstate New York. And she's the author of several books, including The Grass Fed Gourmet Cookbook, Radical Homemakers, and Redefining Rich, which was published in 2021. During the growing season, Shannon's weekly essays can be heard on the Hearth of Sap Bush Hollow podcast, which are chronicles and lessons from a life tied to family, community, and the land. You can follow her writing and thoughts year round on her blog at theradicalhomemaker.net. So, hope you enjoy this conversation. Here's Shannon Hayes, author of Redefining Rich.
My name is Shannon Hayes. I am the chef and CEO of Sapbush Hollow Farm, a 3-generation family livestock farm in the northern Catskill Mountains of New York State. I am also an author of a couple of books and cookbooks and host of the Hearth of Sapbush Hollow podcast. And I'm a really happy mom, daughter, wife. How did I get here? I got here by just dreaming what I thought would make me really happy in life.
I love that. You have such an awesome story, having just, like I was saying, devoured your Redefining Rich book. I
I really
think
gave you homework, didn't I?
you really did. We love it. We love our homework. My mom and I have a business together. It's Lady Farmer, which is the e-commerce sustainable living side of our brand that's been through so many iterations, and all we're ever trying to do is figure out what we're doing and how to make it work. And your book was just such a balm for me, at least. You have a way of talking about your own story and going through your own evolution that's so positive and hopeful and not delusional or like, all you have to do is XYZ, buy my online course and I'll show you, and then manifesting, and you know what I'm talking about
Yeah,
because you're in the
actually,
same
I was
space.
only willing to sell that book if they didn't make me do that.
And it's just like so real and relatable. And there's like one tiny windfall at the beginning, but you're very open about it. I've noticed that there's a lot of, oh, I can't do that because my family didn't give me a ton of land. And you just address that stuff head on. It's been a really, really fun read
Well,
for me.
Emma, it's interesting that you bring that up. I mean, when I wrote Radical Homemakers, I got a lot of hate mail, and a lot of people were very angry at me for living the life that I do. I started to identify myself in adulthood as an anxious person, and I would probably take that anxiety back and say a lot of that really flared up around the time of Radical Homemakers. I would say that book was, as I'm glad I wrote it. I'll never regret the experience, but it was the genesis of probably the toughest year of my life because it got so much publicity and I didn't understand and I was not equipped. So I just felt like I was a living contradiction the whole time. And so that just gave me a lot of digestive issues and made me feel very uncomfortable. And at the same time, I got on social media and I was doing these things. And I just learned getting off it that it wasn't necessary. The core of my business is about we nourish and restore family, community, and planet. I learned that I didn't have to do that. We think when we're media people, when we're creatives, I'm going to speak as a creative now and not as a farmer, but this is also going to apply to farming. We think that our voice has to get to everybody. And the deep insight that I considered when I had this happen was maybe my voice does not have to get to everybody. In fact, I saw it with Radical Homemakers. I wrote Grass Fed Gourmet before Michael Pollan did Power Steer, like it was around the same, I was working on these things early, and there were other people who were ahead of me who were working on the grass-fed meat issue. And I wrote Radical Homemakers, and now there's like a whole movement of people who do this. And I started to realize that as a writer, I think I thought I had to be famous and I had to put my ideas out there. And then if somebody else got known for my ideas, well, then my ego thought, well, they're stealing my ideas, right? But then you realize if you're a creative person and your spiritual gift that you got from the universe was to be a writer and to process ideas and think, then your job is to put those ideas out there. And if that's your dharma, then your job is to put those ideas out there. Your job is not to worry about whether you're a bestseller or whether you get your own TV show or 10 million followers on YouTube. That's not your job. If you're a writer, your job is to create an idea and give birth to it. And what I've seen in my career is that letting go of these ideas, they snowball, they become other ideas, people build on them. And if I'm honoring the spiritual gift, I would argue when I get to the pearly gates or whatever it is, I didn't become famous. But when I had my brushes with fame, however short and ephemeral, they were not happy experiences. And now I see how Radical Homemakers, which was written so long ago, now I see how someone really, it's just considered a legitimate choice. Back when I wrote it, it was crazy. I got so much hate mail, and now it's like, oh no, it's a legitimate choice. And I think, wow, no one knows how much work I put into getting people to think that way. And so has the universe provided? Yes, but I had to realize to bring my gifts to the world, I did not need to reach everybody. I need to reach the people who need to know it. That's it.
I think that framing that you did about for creatives to recognize that the end goal is not the bestseller list, no matter what we tell ourselves. Probably everybody that says, I want to write a book, they have the hopes that it'll be widely distributed and their name will be recognized and they'll, you know, get the call from Oprah or whatever. But anyway, somewhere in my older age, that sort of hit me too. Like, all that stuff doesn't matter. And when you really take that in, when you really internalize that, the stress level goes down so much. And it's like, if you have a story to tell, that's the job, to tell the story, to get it out there, not to have control over what happens next. And creative people, artists that want to make a living doing this, they need to listen to your book.
So I've had a couple decades to reflect on people's anger about what they don't have.
Mm-hmm.
The work that we are doing as independents, whether it is agriculture or a creative business, or whether we're running coffee shops or any kind of small independent business, let's face it, this is the only bright future we have right now. When people are independent and are supporting each other in communities and building caring economies, this is the future. This is what we have. But what everybody forgets is this is legacy work. If people want to spend their time being angry that someone like me had a father who had a job with a steady salary and was able to buy farmland when farmland was cheap, then they are wasting their own joy. They are wasting that because this is legacy work. My life, growing up on the farm, I was a latchkey kid. Both parents were working. We had to negotiate with my dad to turn on heat in the bedrooms in the winter. It was not easy. I got off the school bus alone from the age of 8 with my brother. We had to do chores. We were knocking ice out of buckets. We didn't get home. It was dark. It was like 4 o'clock before the bus actually got up the mountain to where we lived. It was chores. It was starting a wood stove. It was not easy. But this is legacy work. And does my life look really comfortable now? Yeah, it does. And it looks really comfortable because, yes, generations of us have worked together to help each other. We really have. And that generational support, whether that's biological or not, is extremely important. What that means then is it always starts someplace. Every legacy has to start someplace. And some of us start at zero because we didn't get that. And some of us, like me, I am very privileged that there was a farm. The funny thing is, when I grew up, they were trying to chase us out of agriculture because they thought there was no future. I just feel sad for people whose lives are stymied because of resentment. And that can sound very posh, right? Here I am sitting comfortable, say, well, you're just going to ruin your life if you don't start. But there was a time when my future looked just as bleak because, and again, people don't believe this because so many of us worked in agriculture to turn the future around. But it was considered a dead end. They chased kids off of farms like weeds in the spray line of herbicides in my time when I was growing up. Farm kids were ostracized in the classroom. We were relegated to different classrooms. If a kid had a behavior problem, they were put in with the farm kids. I had to argue my way into Cornell because I didn't have the background, like I had to go to them and say, you owe me an education because I'm a New York State farmer and you have a mandate. That's how I got into Cornell University. I was rejected 3 times. But we all have to fight for the things that we get. I would just hate for somebody who has a dream to squelch it because of what they decide makes them a victim. I would argue instead, could you please consider your dream? Because we need dreamers and creatives and independents right now more than anything. Would you please consider that it's a legacy, that you might not get completely independent of the man, right? You might not. But what you build is going to be of value to the next generation and it will build from there. So please don't totally disparage this idea because the privilege that you thought you should have been entitled to wasn't there.
Yeah, I'd love to go back a little bit and hear about the radical homemakers because I just think that was obviously a launching point for you. I think it's super interesting. I think it's fascinating because it's juxtaposed with a big trend that's going on now. I just want to know, okay, you wrote that and it was radical then, and you got this incredible backlash that had traumatized you, caused you anxiety. And now what, 10 years later? When was that published?
20.
Was it only 10 years ago? So 14 years ago?
14 years ago.
You're right.
And now, the culture has really pivoted in a way. And I just love to hear you talk about that. Your
Yeah,
experience,
and your observations.
and then like how you're feeling about it now.
Okay. Let's unearth some trauma.
Yeah.
When I wrote Radical Homemakers, this was a qualitative study. I went out and was investigating people's lives, and I had to build up trust and relationships and get them to really reveal and talk to me. I had to put my feet in their soil and understand where they were coming from. Part of what a qualitative researcher has to do is unearth what the story is not about. I did not want, because those same people, other people who were not featured in the book, revealed their lives enough for me to understand what it was not about. That helped me articulate that, but it didn't go into the book. So, I did spend time with families where women were depressed, where men were depressed, where people were subjugated, fearful. There was putting down of, particularly of women. And I love it. Putting them down while acting like what they were doing was so laudable. We put them down by complimenting their cooking and their nourishment, and we lock them in a box. And I would come out of these things going, wow, they use the same language that I do. I like to make bread and cook too, but why do I want to take a shower when I leave? And I had to really explore that. I needed to be very clear. This was a power decision that was shared power. Okay. Whoever the adults were in a household, this was shared. And one of the things that traumatized me when I got out, so I wrote these stories. One of the things that really upset me was I felt how my words were co-opted and they were bent to serve other people's agendas that were not my agenda at all. That was really traumatic.
Yeah.
And then you're sitting there going, you talked about we have to write and let it go, right? But you've written something and you go, what did I do? What did I unearth? Now, at the same time, there were people who really grabbed the ideas, who understood, who actually read the book. I think some people like looked at the title, looked at a few things, and decided that this justified what they were doing, whether I would have agreed with it or not. So there were people who used it to justify subjugating people further, which I could not get on board with. The whole trad wife movement, yes, that makes me want to gag, because then we become a visual spectacle of like, how do we look on camera? Are we doing pirouettes in our cornfields or whatever? I found that kind of nauseating. And then the other part that was really traumatic, probably the hardest part, was the people who believed in me the most. Like, they believed in me. Like, I just wrote a book, and they embraced my ideas and my thoughts to the point where I'm like, don't you know I'm a blithering idiot? Like everybody else, just trying to figure some shit out? That was like the hardest part, because yes, let's unearth my trauma. I always feel like a fraud, right? And these people didn't believe I was a fraud. And that was just like, oh my God, you want to talk about the stomach pain and the anxiety? Wow, I was so traumatized. I lived on bone broth and tea to try to keep my stomach calm, because I felt like I'd fooled them or I'd hoodwinked them or something, because there was something about me that they believed I was better or purer or smarter, wiser, I don't know, than I really could understand myself to be.
Mhm.
So all of those things made it very difficult. And then the publicity around it, what I eventually learned was, oh, you know what? You're going to write a book, and whatever people make of it is actually about them.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not
their
about me at all.
business. Yeah.
So then I just stopped reading what anybody had to say about it and stopped
Mhm.
paying attention to what anybody had to say about it. We have one little bookseller in town. She does used books, and she loved the book. She bought a whole bunch of them. And she said, "Oh, Shannon, this is wonderful. This is really going to sell. And I'm so proud that you're a local author." And then she calls me up like a few months later. She says, "Shannon, I'm so embarrassed. I haven't sold any of your books." And she says, I don't think people want to read and think around here. And I was like, and that's why I'm living in the right place.
Yeah.
But so I had to detach, as you suggested. You have to let it go and realize people, whatever they read into it is their experience. It's not you. I did my best, really did my best. Redefining Rich was being birthed at my desk. I grew up a lot in that time. I think you can probably sense that voice with Radical Homemakers, because so many people believed that somewhere in there they thought I was a pure Christian, what do they call that? Helpmeet kind of wife.
Yeah.
If I ever swore in front of people, then I would get these nasty letters written to me.
Oh my god.
Oh my goodness, yes. And so by the time I wrote Redefining Rich, I decided, you know what, I'm making who I am pretty clear. I think that we can ask people their pronouns. I
Yeah.
think what makes a loving partnership does not have to be a man and a woman. It can be many different things. And I have a total potty mouth. And and so I wrote it that way, and I just decided,
Yeah.
well, I won't please everybody anymore. I'm just not pleasing people, but at least if they've read it, they have a pretty good sense of who I am.
That's
So
awesome.
that's
Yeah.
what a decade'll do between books.
Oh, that's great. I'm sure someone told you the imposter syndrome is just so normal.
I was writing pre-imposter syndrome. Nobody knew
You were
about it back then.
s-
That was
oh,
somewhere around 2019, 2020 when we started talking
Yeah.
about that.
well, I'm
Yeah.
sure I can imagine how painful that was. If you had no concept of what that was, and yeah,
Or
just
people
pure
like putting
panic.
you in a box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
yes.
so like
Oh, yes.
jarring.
Well, you know, it's really funny because when I came along, I came of age in the 60s and 70s, right? That story you tell of the tea set and your mom and your aunt just freaking out because you liked the tea set. And they were like, oh my God, get that away from her. You know, like you were going to grow up and just do tea parties or something. So when I came along, I think there was like an overreaction to the idea of maybe a woman just wants to raise her kids and maybe not go work a big corporate job and not put on the high heels and stuff. Maybe a woman just really doesn't want to do that. That was not met with such great favor in the 70s. But I remember not being conflicted about it personally.
I suspect you have an ecological ethos, right?
Mhm.
Well, my grandfather always said, between his generation and my parents' generation, you got one person for the price of one person.
Mhm.
And then we had second wave feminism. And what we did with that was we got two people for the price of one.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So we said,
Yeah.
I think I would argue that Betty Friedan's rhetoric was also co opted, and she probably experienced something similar because in the last edition of her book, she said, people, this is not a gender war.
Uh-huh.
This is a corporate America war.
Mm.
And I think when economics became that women have the right to work, well, we always had the right to work, for God's sakes. But
Yeah.
when we started doing that, what we basically said was the work of the home, the nurturing,
Mhm.
the ecological care, the emotional support of a family, the attention to the food, to the
Mhm.
sustenance, we stripped that of all economic value.
Mhm.
And we put everybody in the workplace to generate for an economy that gave no acknowledgement
Mhm.
to these things that mattered so deeply to me anyhow. And I think if you have any kind of ecological sense, then it stands to reason that if you're going to have children, you can't just shove them off and expect that it's not of value whoever cares for them and feeds them and loves them, and that you know an ecological sense is that we're all connected and we're all part of
Mhm.
something. So yeah, I think that happened and we forgot.
Well, I remember when I had my first child, and my husband was in professional school. He was in law school. And so I was the one bringing in the income at that point. And then I was going to have my first child. And so I thought, okay, I want to keep working because, this is pretty good. I need to find someone to do what I would do at home. I quickly realized that getting a person to do all the things, there was not a person to do all those things the way I would have done it, or even do all those things. You can maybe get a childcare person, but they may or may not clean your house or do your meals. That was really hard to find a person. And I quickly realized this person's going to be me. And early on, I dropped out of the workforce and stayed home with my 3 kids. So I was like really eating up your book about the idea of a job, an employment, the most expensive form
Yeah.
of income. I want you to talk more about that to people out there that are just hearing of this and they haven't read your book. But this is one of the most fascinating concepts to me that I had never thought about before. I mean, our whole system is based on employment.
Yes. The first thing is nobody should do something they don't want to do. When we were talking a few minutes ago about making that choice to stay home, I want to make it very clear that it is not my view that this is what every woman should do or what every
Mhm.
parent should do. We all have to find the balance that makes us good parents. And sometimes that means packing little sweethearts off for a few days.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If it makes you a good parent and emotionally available and you're not angry or resentful, then that is the right decision. I want to be very clear on that. But when it comes to employment, it is the most expensive thing you want to do. And it's because of how our tax codes are written. Basically, when you have a job, you get a paycheck, but you probably notice you get a salary of a certain amount of money, but that's never what appears in your paycheck each week. And that's because your Social Security is taken out of that, your Medicare is taken out of that, your state and federal taxes are taken out of that. At the end is what you get to live on. And when you live on that, you've got to use that to pay for your cell phone, for your car, for the clothes that you wear to go to work, for the gas that you need to drive to work. You have to,
Childcare.
yes, for the childcare that frees you up to go to work. And it also pays probably for your food, your housing, and all that. So you get to live the government, to simplify, the government gets their take first as a percentage of your income, and then you are left to live on what's left. That's what makes it the most expensive form of income. I'm self-employed. So what happens when I'm self-employed, I have different income earning strategies that I talk about in the book. Some of it is passive, where I have some rental property. Some of it is active, like I cook in a cafe that I own. We sell meat on the farm. By the way, don't read my book if you're not willing to carefully learn to use an accounting software. You want to document your expenses carefully. But the government tax code is actually written to support business owners because they create jobs, right? But we can take that back and we can say, sure, that's true. But we don't have to be onerous corporate creeps about this, we can take that same code and we can use it to say we are creating jobs. We're not just creating jobs, we're creating living economies. So that is the ethos under which I operate. I too feel like my being in business is making the world a better place. I just don't happen to feel like I have to have billions of dollars to do it. But let's say I'm going to pick an easy round number. Let's say I earn $100,000 a year. And there is an example, a scenario in the book that explains it between two people with $100,000 to show what's left. But let's say I earn $100,000 a year. I do a number of things. I have a blog on Patreon, so I get some patronage money. I have a number of books I've written, so I get some royalties. I have speaking and online teaching that I do periodically, so I get some money from that. I have rental income. I have farm income. All these forms of income are all self-employment. When I need a cell phone, that's a business expense. When I get in my car and drive to town because I need ingredients for the cafe and because I need some stuff from the feed store, that's a business expense. So I don't even own my own car. Sapwash Hollow Farm owns my car. So I don't even have to own a car and pay taxes on the income that bought a car. Sapwash Hollow Farm bought that car. When I have to drive, that's a write-off. When I have to buy food for the cafe, never mind that I'm going to eat the leftovers afterwards. That was all a write-off as well. So I'm a very meticulous bookkeeper. I carefully document everything, but what a business owner gets to do is they get to declare their expenses first, and then they pay taxes on what is left. So you're talking about if someone earns a salary of $100,000 and they pay, I don't know if that puts you in the 30% tax category or something like that, then that's 30% of $100,000. That's $30,000. Now, if another person earns $100,000 in a business, they can write off all their mileage, they can write off their cell phones, they can write off the special equipment or the books that they read to educate themselves because they're probably doing something they're really fascinated with and they'd probably be reading it anyway. All of these things come off and then you're left and you pay taxes on what is left at the end. It is a significant savings. So that's why having a job is the most expensive form of income, which is not to say you shouldn't have a job. It just means that you really need to know. I recommend in the book that if you have at least two earners that are on the tax rolls together, you better have some kind of a business to write off against that to help reduce the tax liability of that job.
Oh, wow.
I just love how the way that you frame your book is obviously this is what you're suggesting, but even if there are two earners together who do have regular salary jobs, what I took away from your book is this idea of the living economy and just keeping in mind as long as you're having fun and your quality of life statement that you help the reader shape and write to themselves, and you're reminding it's just your whole book is just it's a remembering of like what's it all for, and it doesn't have to exist completely outside of the capitalist system that is in this lane that we all exist in. I assume many of the listeners of this podcast exist in, and I say it myself all the time, like, oh, it's capitalism's fault and it's evil and all this. That's so fun to say, and it's an easy scapegoat, but it really doesn't leave us with much to work with, right? Because we're
No,
here
no.
talking on this
Like I said,
computer.
this legacy work. We're building
Yeah.
bridges and
Yeah.
creating opportunities, and it's not all going to happen in a day. I would really love to just like not use Amazon at all.
Yeah.
Face it, I
We
Me.
talked
live
about it in
in the
our
middle
house.
of nowhere, and there are things I cannot
Yeah.
get without,
Yeah.
having to leave the farm for a day and at the extreme cost, to drive to some place that has these things.
Before we go any further, Shannon, I want you to talk about something that's really central to the book, and that is the
To
life.
redefining rich, you mean?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we're on Redefining Rich now. I think it'd be very helpful if you explain to our listeners what you mean by life-serving economy versus the extractive economy, because that's really central and it comes up again and again. It's how you made all your decisions about your business and what you wanted to do.
The short answer is a life-serving economy is circular. It's constantly reinvesting in itself. Whereas an extractive economy starts with a natural resource someplace and someone can take possession of it, assign value to it, and then build wealth by taking that. And it's
Mhm.
very linear. And I don't work in that system as much as as I avoid that system as much as I possibly can. And so in my life-serving economy, for example, we grow food. We're 3 generations. I lost my mother this year, but my father is still with us, and so like the generations teach us and we learn. When they are aging and they're not able to work in the same way, but they're still very involved, we're investing in our children and our children are giving back to us. When we grow food, we are working with the soil, with the land to constantly be reinvesting in the fertility of that land and investing in the quality and health of the livestock so that they will continue to provide us with food, so that they will continue to nourish us, so that we can continue to grow food and provide it for the economy. It's very easy to see how circular it is with farming in particular, as opposed to, I'm going to raise as much food as I can, market as hard and as fast as I can. I'm going to be one generation. I'm going to burn myself out, sell my land, and let someone develop it. And that's going to be
Yeah.
my retirement. So, in the life serving economy, the generations are constantly supporting each other. We're constantly reinvesting in each other and in the land. And that I have found that model expands. The more I've invested in it in my life, the more things can sprout up around it. Activity breeds activity. So, we had Sapwish Hollow Farm, and now we have a couple other little businesses in the community that have gotten started, and they too are investing and reinvesting, and that's how you breed growth that is circular and always giving back.
I had just a couple of weeks ago read Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, The Service Berry, which was very much reflective of these ideas as well, the life-serving economy versus the extractive economy. So it was just a really wonderful affirmation of those ideas and the idea that our current systems are based on the idea of scarcity, but the life-serving economy is based on abundance and the fact that there's plenty. There's
Which
plenty.
actually kind of brings us back to where we started when we were talking about social media and being creatives and putting out in the world. And it is a scarcity versus an abundance mindset
That's so
that,
true.
Yes,
we
yes.
are always trying to scramble to the top because we feel that's the only way that we are fulfilling our promise and that we're making it. And that means that someone else can't climb and someone else can't be there.
Yeah.
But if you start to realize, you know what, I don't have many readers, I just need enough. I need enough to feel inspired to do my work, and
Mhm.
there will be enough to live on, then that's an abundance mentality. There's plenty. I don't have to be the best. I don't have to be the star, you know.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
Yeah. What does slow living mean to you, and how do you live that in your everyday life?
Slow living is a constant struggle. My life is intentional. I make time for the things that matter, which means I make time for too much stuff.
Same.
And therefore, the pace, the slowness is something that I think I think there's an assumption about slow living that you can achieve it, but it's not. It's something you constantly have to work at. Life creeps in around you all the time, and you have to figure out what you're going to answer to and what you're not going to answer to, or what you're going to put off for another day to carve out that slower space and that slower pace. I think we can't mislead ourselves to think that it's an achievement. It's not. It's something that we always work toward. And then because of that, it forces us to pay attention and always be reflective about what really is the most important thing right now.
And that
Totally.
really brings in the idea of the quality of life statement that you talk about in Redefining Rich. Yeah.
Yes, I talk about it at length.
So this show is called The Good Dirt, and we like to ask all of our guests what the good dirt means to them, figuratively or metaphorically or literally, however you want to think about it.
Well, someone once said to me when I went to college, it was very hard for me to get through college because I never wanted to be there. Finally, I was at a college that had a greenhouse. And I showed up at the greenhouse one day, and it was my first week of school. I transferred 4 times to get a 4-year degree, just to give you an idea. And I showed up at this greenhouse, and I said to the man running it, I have to be here. And he's like, well, I'm not going to hire you. And I said, no, I really have to be here. You don't have to pay me. I have to be here. And so he begrudgingly put up with me, became my lifelong friend. But I remember saying, I need some more dirt for the plants. And he says to me, Shannon, it is not dirt. It is soil. And I guess that's what I would say the good dirt is. The good dirt is soil. It will
Yes.
grow something.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Truly.
So,
The good dirt, to me, the good dirt is this book. I'm just so excited about it.
absolutely. And I really appreciate how all the way through the book, Redefining Rich, you evaluated decisions based on many things, but one of them was, would it protect and improve the soil, our planet's soil?
Yes, that's your constant.
That's
sort
one
of
of your measures of what you wanted to be doing with your life. And so this spoke very, very directly to us in so many ways. But
Oh, I'm glad. And soil and the people. We've made crazy business decisions that seem to not make sense at all. But I'm protecting the people in my circle, and
Yeah.
we are always about that.
something I would love every listener of this podcast to know is that everybody, whatever your circumstances are, whatever you're struggling with, everybody has the option or the opportunity to create good dirt in some way or to make decisions that don't harm the soil, and that's speaking metaphorically or literally. So it's just such a good idea to cogitate on. So
Thank you.
So, Shannon, where can folks find you?
So sapbushfarmstore.com is now the host of the Radical Homemaker blog. But if you type in theradicalhomemaker.net, it will bring you there. And you can see all about Sapbush Hollow Farm. You can see the blog. The podcast is called The Hearth of Sapbush Hollow, and it runs only during the growing season. So it starts up in about May and goes through the summer. And those are chronicles and essays from a life tied to family, community, and the land. And you can find a number of years of archives of the Hearth of Sapbush Hollow. If you like my voice, if you like to hear stories, that's the kind of podcast that it is. And you can find that wherever you listen to podcasts.
So fun.
thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks for a reflective evening.
Thank you for tuning in, calling in, and spreading the good dirt. We love hearing from you. You can reach our listener voicemail at 443-459-1950. That's 443-459-1950. You can find this number in our show notes and in our Instagram profile.
This show is produced by Lady Farmer, a slow living lifestyle community, and the original music is composed and performed by John Kingsley.
For more from Lady Farmer, follow us on Instagram at WeAreLadyFarmer. That's We Are Lady Farmer. Or join us online at www.ladyfarmer.com. We'll see you next time on The Good Dirt.
Goodbye.